I think one of the most difficult things you can do as a man is ask for help. And a lot of men that I know, a lot of men that I've been around throughout my life, they struggle asking for help when they need it the most. And I'm sort of the mind that a man will not ask for help because he doesn't want to be a burden. A man wants to lift burdens, a man wants to bear burdens and carry them himself. A man does not want to be the burden. Now, let that sink in for a little bit. Man does not want to be the burden himself. And you may be wondering, but there are a lot of guys out there that get on social media and they'll talk about their feelings a little bit and maybe they'll post about it on their story. Maybe they'll even TikTok about it. But if you ask that same man in person to express those feelings, to express those sentiments, are they going to be honest and upfront and open with you about those feelings? I very much doubt it. And that's simply because men get judged for being emotional creatures. A man displaying any overt emotion, no matter whether it be positive, he might get labeled as creepy. If it be angry, he might get labeled as abusive. If it might be sad, he might be labeled emo or depressed or something like that. A man simply cannot bear a weight and then display his emotions in a way that will be perceived by the public in any sort of positive way. There's a barrier here between the camera and I. If I'm talking to you, there is a barrier here. Now, don't you see how sad that is, the hypocrisy of that? That we live in a world where it's acceptable for a man to talk about his feelings, but also acceptable to judge a man over his feelings. All you have to do is to go into any female dominant social circle, and I can almost guarantee you that the topic of conversation there will be men, relationships, and relationship problems. I'm a bartender. I almost deal exclusively with large groups of women, and what I hear, spoken about is those problems. And it's made me wonder about how men are able to progress from this in a way where socially they aren't essentially self-erasing. And you've got to be careful when you come up with those sorts of terms on YouTube and stuff, because you don't know which ones are going to get nuke your channel or anything like that. It's a bit problematic that you can't just talk about stuff on YouTube without sort of having to self-censor, and I'm completely against censorship, but that's another issue for another day. I wish we lived in a world, at least here in the West, but I'm sure across cultures outside of the West as well, in even more masculine dominant societies where there's an even bigger problem there where men can't express themselves either. And it's kind of sad because I've been rereading some excellent books here. Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate, Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, and Chasing the Scream by Johan Hari. Not lightweight reading material by any stretch of the imagination, but they are essential books when you're looking at trauma. And when I was at university, I learned that most traumas are attachment traumas, and these occur within the first 2 years of life. Let that kind of sink into your brain a little bit. If you're dealing with somebody, they don't even have to have gone to war, which is essentially what Bessel van der Kolk says in The Body Keeps the Score, that trauma isn't just for veterans that are experiencing PTSD or anything like that. It can be experienced by literally everyone. And the word trauma is overused nowadays, but he makes distinction between little t and big T traumas. So a little t trauma might be a breakup, or you've experienced you've been fired from work or something like that, versus the big T traumas of deaths, actual assault. I don't know if you can say that on YouTube, so let's go grape, things like that. It's hard to talk seriously about topics that YouTube actively makes an effort to censor. It's like, how are you supposed to discuss things? How are you supposed to be open about things if YouTube is actively censoring the way people talk? It's ridiculous. Again, different issue for a different day. So as I've been rereading some of these, rereading passages, it's made me think about how in society, in the West at least, men don't have the same platforms and they aren't given the same amounts of openness when it comes to expressing themselves and their feelings. I've never been like, I'm a little bit of that mindset. I'm a little bit of that sort of old world thinking when it comes to masculinity and, men being the strong, silent type. There's nothing wrong with that. And I don't think that's toxic or anything, nor is toxicity gendered either. Toxicity is something that individuals experience and utilize. Men as a whole aren't toxic and women as a whole aren't toxic. So we've got to end that right there. But I was thinking about how wouldn't it be nice if men knew for a fact that they could express themselves and be open about their feelings and in a way that's public, in a way that's open, without the having to bear the burden of not only the issues that they're dealing with, but the social stigma of expressing themselves. That right there is such a large component for men just keeping things in, because nobody wants to listen to a man's problems. Other men will listen to a man's problems, but sometimes an alternate perspective is required. Sometimes it's good to talk about this sort of stuff with the opposite sex. And it's just sad that we live in a world where you simply cannot be open about these things. And my hope going forwards, especially as my generation ages up a bit, as my generation gets a little older, that we are living in a world where men can talk about these things and men can be open about these things without facing that social stigma. And you see that every day on TikTok. Just go on TikTok and a large part of your feed is just going to be podcasts, and it's going to be men being ultra vicious towards women and women being ultra vicious towards men. It is a vicious cycle. It is cyclical. It's terrible. And we really shouldn't be at each other's throats. Men and women are meant to complement one another. We're meant to complement our strength. We both have our strengths and weaknesses, and we are sort of designed to be complementary to one another. And the sooner we're able to recognize that again, acknowledge it, and utilize that sort of thinking, the better the world's going to be again. It's not that one gender or one sex is better than another. It's not like that at all. It's all about equity and how we're all strong in our own ways. We're all unique in our own ways. And I would challenge those in power. I would challenge those in positions of authority to recognize that men simply don't have the same outlets as women when it comes to expressing frustrations, when it comes to vocalizing their issues and their problems. Because whether or not you want to admit it, it is absolutely true. It is a truth that we live in a world right now here in the West where men are demonized for expressing their feelings. Men are demonized for being open about their feelings. And it's got to stop. It just has to stop. And I hope one day soon that we are able to live in a world where that is no longer the case. Anyways, those are just some quick thoughts as I've been rereading some of these texts. And if you have some thoughts on this subject, I would love to hear them down below. Please, by all means, share your thoughts on this subject. And until the next video, my name is Marcel, and I'll catch you guys around.